Space Action Podcast! With your hosts, Chris Carson and DC and Shama.
Welcome to Space Action Podcast, a division of Space Action Heroes, a webcomic you can find at spaceactionheroes.com. I'm DC and Shama.
I'm Chris Carson.
And this week we're doing a weird social experiment as a peek behind the curtain. Chris and I aren't even in the same room right now.
No, we are an hour and a half or so away from each other, and if you haven't noticed yet, then we've done our job.
Yeah, other than the fact that I'm pretty sure you can hear the reverb in this room.
The recordings may sound differently because, yeah, we're both independently recording our side of the conversation.
So it's going to be interesting.
Should be interesting.
So before we jump into the albeit sad of it all this week, I like to start with a positive note by acknowledging 50% of us are older this week.
Oh.
There was other ways to phrase that, but everyone knows that fucking
half of us are 1 year closer to the grave this week.
One step closer. Well, if you put it that way, you're 1 minute closer than you were 60
That's
seconds
true.
ago.
Oh god, now I'm just panicking. Just dying.
Chris's birthday was on the 17th, so happy birthday, motherfucker.
And I'm going to repeat the story that I just told you. I was feeling self-conscious, so I shaved my gray beard, and now I look like a fat little pedophile.
Oh, Lord. A fat little pedophile. The best kind of pedophile.
Is the little ones.
Yeah, you don't want those lanky, tall ones. They're just creepy.
No. The little ones are adorable.
Yeah,
they're kind of kids themselves.
Especially when Chris Hansen calls the cops and tackles him on the lawn. They just roll around. Fuck, they're cute.
They're so adorable.
Anyways, many happy returns, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to have to just stay in a basement somewhere for the next 2 or 3 weeks until my beard grows back.
You need some Arthur Morgan hair growing tonic, son.
Yes, I do. Even though that doesn't work on the damn beard, though. It just works on the hair.
Really?
Well, at least as far as I could tell, because I finished the game, and I never still got to 100% beard growth.
God damn it, I've been chugging that shit.
Yeah, me too. But the hair, I think the hair only has a maximum of 5 growth levels, and then the beard has like 11, and so it takes forever.
Oh, okay. Well, god damn it. Anyways, from births.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry. Again, I have no fucking way. I have no. I have no like. What's the word I'm looking for? Grace or style to like ease into a conversation. I'm like, hey, who died?
Yeah, the transition from birth to death, it should be as uncomfortable as it is in reality, I guess.
And also, like, it just helps me deal with how sad this is. This week, the comic book community lost a titan, a spearhead and a cornerstone of the creative community. Mr. Stanley Martin Lieber, a.k.a. Stan Lee.
Yeah.
95...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say 95 years old, which is an amazing run.
That's the thing, is that it's like there's no tragedy in the death of an old man, but it's super sad because we lost someone who influenced every single one of our lives.
And like it's something like it's inevitable. I remember the last time I saw footage of Stan was last year when he was unfortunately in the middle of all those the controversy with his money being embezzled by his daughter and his agents.
Remember they tried to accuse him of like sexually harassing a nurse to undermine his claim to his own money?
Yeah.
His extended family are fucking monsters.
It's kind of rough. I saw a thing, I'll get to it, but like his daughter's trying to be like, oh, he had one more comic book character that we were working on. I'm like, you are heartless. Like, from what I've heard, you're just not the greatest person.
No, it's so weird that everyone surrounding him in his life turned out to be blood-sucking monsters.
Not surprising, though, considering, like, the dude just seemed so warm and friendly and just, like, seemed like the type of dude. Like, I watched that documentary, what's it called? Great Power Comes Great Responsibility.
Okay.
And there's a line straight up where, like, Stan, obviously somewhat joking, just goes, I made up all this money over the course of my years so my daughter and my wife can spend it all. And, he's kind of kidding, but, like, from what you see, he wasn't wrong, you know? Like, from what I've heard about his daughters, I don't want to turn this into a smear podcast. I'd rather honor the man, but, it's kind of, it's not at my place. I don't really give a shit about, like, their personal family lives, but the fact that, like, the last time I saw him, he was, in that interview, really labored breathing because he had asthma, I believe.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah, asthma or pneumonia, I forget, but he was just like, "Hey there, true believers, it's me, Stan. Just reach," and it's just like, oh, jeez, man, like, and just knowing that, like, listen, you had a fucking amazing run, and just to see you at the end there in such labored pain, I'm like, what else is this man gonna do?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
You know, like, what, he's gonna become like immortal? Other than that, I can't see what else is gonna happen. You know?
Yeah, and it's a 95. That's nothing to sniff at or to scoff at, I should say. It's I always reference the line from A Prairie Home Companion, that Robert Altman's final movie, where with the line of "There's no tragedy in the death of an old man. Just like honor his life and understand that was time."
Yeah, seriously. The thing I thought was really sweet in that same doc, he's like, you know, people are always saying, "Why don't you retire? You know, you've done all these things." And he's like, "But he reminded me of you, dude," where he was like, "I just want to do more. I want to do more acting. I want to do more writing. I want to direct. I want to do all," like, even to like the end, dude, he was still like, "I want to still do shit."
Yeah,
you know,
that's why I'm the person who wants immortality, because I'm like, there's no end to all this. I can just keep doing new things for all time.
Yeah,
I can't imagine you could ever get bored.
And I think that's what was so cool that's what was so attractive about the dude's personality, is that, like, people were looking at this old man who already could rest on his laurels and was still going out to cons and meeting fans and, like, doing cameos and all this shit.
As long as he could, yeah.
Yeah.
He was getting pretty frail at the end, though. I know he was pretty weak. He had a
The rascal.
full-time nurse and was wheelchair bound, unfortunately.
He was in that Rascal the last time I saw him at Fan Expo, I think 3 years ago.
Is there any truth to that? Because a few years ago, Marvel said we've shot like 15 Stan Lee cameos, so we can insert him into any movie for the next 20 years.
That's what I've heard. And the thing is, like, if you look at those cameos, it's not like they're cameos. They're not relevant at all to the plot. So it's literally just him be like, "Oh no," and that's it.
Yeah.
So you just
And
need
that's
to
it.
you're gonna stick him on a green screen and just have him in there. I think that's what they're going to do.
But I guess the question is that in poor taste to now have 5, 6, 7 more years of Stan Lee cameos? Or should they just sort of let that character disappear?
I would say yes if they were CGIing his face onto someone like they did Carrie Fisher. But knowing who the guy is and the fact that he filmed those cameos, you can tell he was like, "I'm gonna die, and I want to keep being in these, so I'm remembered. So film the fuck out of it." It's not like they forced him in front of the camera. I really doubt, you know.
That's true. It's not like his son-in-law had a switch out and was smacking him into the studio.
Exactly. So I think that, like, if anything, it's a good way to remember him. Like, you know, it is his legacy, these movies, you know. Like, you know, it's billions and billions of dollars. It's easily the most success the dude's achieved in a 10-year stretch where his name and face is plastered all over these things.
Yeah, Stan Lee was always huge to us, and now he's huge to, like, nerds, and now he's huge to the world.
What was your first exposure to Stan?
Well, I remember I read you put a wonderful little thing on Facebook,
Yeah.
and I think that's pretty much parallels my first exposure too. Even though, again, I'm like six years older. I never really had a face to the man until Mallrats.
Yeah,
because I'm not sure. I mean, you always would see that little illustration in Stan's soapbox,
Right.
But I'm trying to think, because it's really before the internet, before the, you know, maybe he was in some back issue of Starlog magazine once that I didn't get. I don't know.
Sure.
But I remember that as well, of being like, oh, that's Stan Lee. Oh, weird.
I remember the physical feeling of actualizing. I had a similar experience the first time I saw. Oh shit. My phone.
Oh no!
The first time I saw Jimi Hendrix, I was like, that gigantic sound and voice is coming out of that scrawny little dude. Are you serious?
Dude, yeah.
And it was the same thing with Stan Lee. It was just like, he looked like, I don't want to like make it sound bad, but he did look like a car salesman. Like the tinted shades. He's got the beard in Mallrats and like.
Well, yeah, because he has that full beard in Mallrats, so he doesn't have his quintessential Stan Lee look yet.
He's straight out of the 70s, 80s period Stan in that movie. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. This guy looks like a man stuck out of time. Of course he's the creator of all these classic characters. He still looks like it's the fucking 70s, man. Like, it's awesome.
I remember seeing that movie, or watching that clip again recently, and just picturing the behind the scenes of Kevin Smith asking Stan Lee to talk about his creation's dicks.
Yes.
And if that was an uncomfortable moment,
so
or if that was
funny.
a giggly moment for the two of them.
There was one cute thing Kevin Smith spoke about this week, which I thought was really cute, was he had to remember that little tag on scene where Stan's walking back through the mall and he runs into TS, and he's like, I think he bought it. That whole scene, Stan asked him to write in because he was like, if I go out there and in a movie, my first big movie role, say that there was this girl that I fell in love with and I moved on, my wife will kill me. He's like, she is the girl I fell in love with. Like, she was the number one. I got my number one, but I can't.
That would not have fit into the story.
Exactly.
At all,
And
yeah.
she's like, and he's like, but Stan, you're playing Stan Lee, the character, not Stan Lee. She's like, she's not going to know that. Like, I have to differentiate the two of them. So that's why that little tag on scene is in there. But I love it because it's the only time he acknowledges. He seems to have an obsession with superhero genitalia.
And then TS, right? That's the
TS,
guy's name,
yeah.
with his incredible 90s look. And he gives him that little, like, oh, you look at the end as Stan Lee walks away.
It's kind of great. Like, I guess like you can't really quantify that as a cameo. It's fully a role. But if you think about it, Stan is the only... I'm going to chalk up his cameos to... I like the Watcher theory from Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Oh,
the Watcher
yeah, where
informant.
he's the same guy in multiple forms.
But he's the only one, if you think about it, to cross through the multiverses. Because he's in the Fox movies, he's in the Sony movies, he's in the MCU movies. So Stan is really the only consistent character. He could be the thread that we pull to get the X-Men in if we really wanted to.
Yeah, seriously. I guess that unintentionally, his cameo set up the idea of a splintered multiverse.
Yeah.
Where the X-Men are off over here. And that's what I'm hoping, that's the direction that the MCU takes now that they have Fox. I hope that they bring in an established multiverse. I hope they don't just reboot X-Men. It's like this far into the Marvel Universe, mutants are just now showing up? That'd be very odd.
Yeah, I guess you can't really write your way around that because like it's been insinuated the Avengers have been going across almost like galaxy at this point, fighting people. How have you not heard about mutants yet?
It's like Wolverine hasn't shown up on the radar anywhere
that's
yet at
true.
this point.
That's true. We didn't notice they were mutants because we've been misclassifying them as enhanced all this time. We don't know why.
But now we know the term is in fact mutant. We can say that now, so we're going to say it a lot. Mutant.
I think we talked about this once in the podcast. Your first intro to the Marvel universe was the cartoons.
For sure, definitely the X-Men and Spider-Man cartoons, and then obviously like the comics as a kid. And I don't know if I've ever revealed this on a podcast before, but the Mary Jane knocked me into puberty as a kid. And I actually recently found that panel of Mary Jane drawn by Todd McFarlane in like a nightgown in like a tiny little outfit, and I was like, that's the image that
actualized it.
That's the one. That's the actual one. Jesus, that was when I went, oh.
And you're like, it holds up. Oh my!
Thanks.
Wait, the white lingerie one?
It's the issue, a Todd McFarlane issue where he fights the Scorpion, and Scorpion gets his new tail. It's the first time Scorpion actually has a scorpion tail filled with poison.
Gotcha.
And it's from like 1993 or 4,
right.
Or 92 or 1. I think it was like 10 or 11.
There's a lot of them.
And yeah, it's she's angry at Peter. So because he came home late, and so she's angry, and in a tiny little outfit, and he actually drew like her nipple impressions. And as like a 10-year-old, I went, oh, I get it now.
Thus also implying that Mary Jane is still just the worst.
She is.
Like consistently across multiple platforms, this woman gives the guy no fucking bend whatsoever. Like there's no leniency.
Yeah, and the original Mary Jane is a model, so she's not like they made her an actress in the Raimi movies, and then in the new Spider-Man video game, they've taken her to the next step and made her a journalist at the Daily Bugle. But Mary Jane herself is supposed to be sort of a dimwit model.
Yeah,
like her character is supposed to, unfortunately, because she was made in the 60s, she was always supposed to be the dumb, pretty prize for Spider-Man.
Exactly. Not a great, not the best representation of a powerful woman by any stretch of the imagination, and it's kind of crazy that it's lasted this long.
But then I guess you can look at it as there's so many powerful women in Spider-Man, like Black Cat and
Madame Web,
even Gwen Stacy, arguably. That isn't it okay? There are dumb, pretty women in the world.
I guess
are we
just
not
kind of
allowed to have those in media anymore?
From my personal perspective, it just comes from the thing of just like, come on, Peter, you can do better. Like, what are you doing? Jesus, she's got the IQ of a dead rat.
Yeah, right. But no, they have totally successfully reinvented her as being a quite a modern lady that and I don't even know if they're together in the comic books
Anymore? I don't think so.
I think they've been broken up and put back together so many times. I honestly don't know. I know that when Doc Ock took over Peter's body for like 2 years, he was trying to get frisky with Mary Jane.
Right.
She wasn't having it.
Right. It's very face-off.
Yeah, kind of. Why did their bodies change too? That doesn't seem to make any sense.
Oh Lord! See, and there you go, right there. Like that's what I was gonna say earlier. Is like I wrote about on Facebook the soap opera like nature that this was able to ingrain into these cartoons and comic books. Like I remember every morning on Saturday, I would sit there and anxiously await to see Wolverine reunited with Morph in like the first bromance that precedes Bucky and fucking the Winter Soldier. What do you call it? Captain America. Before them, Logan was searching for Morph like it was the bitter end, because Stan just knew, if I craft a universe and interconnect these fucks, I can pull this taffy for as long as possible.
Oh yeah.
And it's held up, man, to the point where like you see Infinity War and all of a sudden Star-Lord's talking to Iron Man, you're like, oh my god, they're friends now. You know, like, and I think that's what is so remarkable, what I've started to notice in the past week since his passing, was Stan was so good at ingraining a sense of community and like it was a fan club. Like DC doesn't really have a Stan Lee that kind of just oversees everything and makes it like it's kind of like the godfather of it all.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you could arguably say Bob Kane, but then he only made Batman.
Like, I think if I'm not mistaken, he fucking hated Superman. You know what I'm saying? But like,
and he kind of stole the idea of Batman too. There was the whole controversy about that as well.
What's that? Oh, enlighten me.
That Bob Kane, I would have to give that a Google
from Bill Finger.
Sorry?
The whole Bill Finger thing?
Yeah.
How they only, like, recently, I think, unfortunately, Batman vs. Superman was the first movie that Bill Finger got credit for creating Batman.
Yeah, finally. Yeah, because he was, Bob Kane was just sort of the overseer guy.
Yeah.
And then he spent, like, 60 years being like, nah, I did it.
And, like, you want to talk about the difference between hubris and humility. Like, oh my god, dude. Have you ever seen Bob Kane's headstone?
No, is it insane?
Can I read from it?
Yeah.
It is one of the most self-centered, douchey things I've ever read, and you get one guess as to who wrote it. Robert Kane, so October 24th to 1915 to November 3rd, 1990. I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'm just going to pick some key pieces.
Some little moments. Oh, it's that long, eh?
It's 6 paragraphs. I'm not going to read the whole thing, feel free to Google it. God, all caps, bestowed a dream upon Bob Kane. Blessed with divine inspiration and a rich imagination, Bob created a legacy known as Batman. A hand of God creation, Batman and his world personify the eternal struggle of good versus evil, with God, again capital, God's laws prevailing in the end. Bob Kane, Bruce Wayne, Batman, they are one and the same. Bob infused his dual identity character with his own attributes: goodness, kindness, compassion, sensitivity, generosity, intelligence, integrity, courage, purity of spirit, a love of all mankind, and refusal to give his co-creator any fucking credit for almost 60 years.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's not in there. I just added that.
So that's like, he wrote that himself, and that is all on his tombstone.
It's on his fucking grave, dude.
Ew.
You know how ugly that is? But like Stan, however, that it was really great.
I hope his just says Excelsior.
I hope it does. You know what I mean? Like Excelsior, or just like, you know, Nuff said.
Yeah, Nuff said would be great
really
too.
Cute. But that's what I loved about Stan, man, is that he really was like a P.T. Barnum for these things. Like whenever people were harping on fucking comic books and like they had to introduce the code back in the day, because a bunch of psychologists were like, "Ooh, no, the comic book code needs to be enforced because these lewd, crude, and fucking horrible images inspire kids to become sociopaths." He had to go out there in front of like in daytime television and be like, "They're just fantasy stories.
Just stories, yeah.
All my characters are about looking out for the little guy." And another
what
thing
if the sidekick was the superhero?
Yeah,
I made Spider-Man.
And like the other thing, I think the reason it really drove home, especially these days, the state of things and down south, Chris Evans' portrayal of Captain America, I always thought was so unique and like such an interesting take on the character, but not really. I feel like Stan's work in general was representative of America. You have
Of
this
the
country.
real meaning of America.
Yeah, the real meaning of America of just like, listen, after you stole all this land from Native Americans, you are now the most prosperous, richest country. You have so much responsibility. You have to be the leading voice of morality and reason.
And by the people, for the people, that whole chestnut, the first time that ever really existed in human history.
Exactly. And like the idea that just like these characters, unlike, you know, being an alien from another planet or a billionaire whose parents get murdered, they're just guys. Like even if they're super scientists, they're just guys. And all of a sudden they're bestowed with these amazing gifts and they're like, oh, Jesus, what do I do with this? And I think that's what's so beautiful about Marvel Comics that we all relate to is that the United States of America, North America in general, is essentially a giant apartment building, right? Mm-hmm. It was this land of opportunity. Everybody come here and we'll blah, 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 blah. And that's why so many eyes, I think, are on the States. Is because we all have a dog in this race. Every country has someone living here that we all feel so disenfranchised to see it go down the shitter. Like every country's like, Jesus Christ, I thought that those were the guys that were going to lead us into tomorrow.
Yeah, there always has to be a Rome that leads the whole rest of the world, and our Rome is burning right now.
You know, quite literally.
Oh, yeah, Jesus.
You know? And I think that's what is so profound about Stan's movies, why these MCU flicks continue to prosper, is because we love the idea of, like, someone who has the ability to enslave the planet, but doesn't, is still servient to the common good. And it's so ingrained. Like this week, it really hit me between the eyes. I'm like, it's so ingrained in all of his work.
Oh, for sure. And like, what is it? The old adage that DC was always about the powers and the characters came second, and then Marvel was always about the characters and their power came second, because you needed to inform why you would not use those powers to, as you say, just take over the world.
Right.
Because like Batman, I mean, I guess Batman's the one exception because he's had 80 years of development, but everyone else is sort of they're no more than they're just their powers.
Yep.
Superman, the Flash, Green Lantern, no one cares about those characters.
No.
But who cares what Peter Parker's wearing? He's Spider-Man. Peter Parker is more important.
And that's what's so interesting. Another thing I really love is that, like, yeah, Batman, I love the character, but he's Batman. He has to put on a costume to become... I'm paraphrasing the speech from Kill Bill, Volume 2. Mm. He has to put on a costume to become a superhero. But Peter Parker is pretending to be a normal dude. Wolverine's pretending to be a normal dude. Like, they're all just, like, hiding in plain sight. Mm-hmm. They're like, we have to, like, no, we are our superpowers. We have to pretend to be human. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what was so cool about the civil rights messages of X-Men. Mm-hmm. Of, like, you know, we have Magneto representing Malcolm X, like, you know, we have to overcome and oppress our oppressors, as opposed to Martin Luther King / Professor X, who's like, no, together is the only way forwards. Is the idea of, like, this entire community that's like, we have to hide to make everyone else comfortable because they're afraid of us. Mm-hmm. Like, black people in the 60s and 70s, it's like, we kind of have to just stay quiet. We have to go into the quiet place and just be subservient to this cause. And it's kind of like, I love the idea of the burden of these guys.
Oh, for sure. And I love, like, the fantastical element too, where it's like black people in the 60s who can melt people with their minds as well.
Melt people who are, like, jeering them and throwing shit at them, but they still don't. Yeah. Like, so who's taking the high road here, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess just talk briefly about X-Men is because X-Men started off as a sort of a parable for civil rights, and then Bryan Singer sort of turned it into a parable for for being gay. For gay rights. And now I'm sorry, not Wolverine. The X-Men just sort of do sit with insert subjugated group here. Yes. Like we're going to represent every underdog.
Yes.
Now that's great. That's great that they're evolving that way.
Evolving. I see what you did there. I'm just looking at his history because, like, I didn't know much about his childhood, but just the idea of, like, the kid grew up, not surprisingly, in the Bronx. Like, he straight up was fucking Chris Evans, essentially.
New Yorker, yeah.
He, like, I watched the start of Captain America now very differently, being like, that was him. He was just a little dude who's like, I have a dream and I can make a difference if I try.
Yeah, that's what made me realize that he was 20 in 1942.
Yep.
So it's like he was at the prime of his young life when World War II was happening. He was 100% Captain, even though he had nothing to do with Captain America. He was 100% Captain America.
It's pretty funny, just the idea that, like, he was what is it, Martin?
He enlisted for the army, and then they set him to be something weird. He stayed stateside because I watched a documentary about him too, where two things fascinated me. Was one that he stayed stateside as like a writer.
Playwright. Playwright was his official
playwright.
military classification.
And then the other thing I thought was great was that he openly was like, basically until Spider-Man, we just took whatever DC was doing and did our version of it.
It's pretty awesome.
It's awesome that you can just admit that, unlike, say, Bob Kane.
Somewhere like in the afterlife, Bob Kane's like, "Fuck you, guy,"
and Stan Lee's just going,
Enough said.
Suck my dick, Kane.
It's pretty funny, yeah, man. Like he was like, it was the idea that the man never stopped working. Like he was talking about, I think he had a paper job whenever he was a kid because his dad was always in and out of work. And, you're dealing with, like, 30s, 40s, New York City and the Bronx. I think that really shines through in terms of his work ethic. In terms of, like, his sense of community. Of just, like, if you grew up as a teenager, I always believe that, like, the environment you grow up in your teens and 20s is kind of going to cement the man or woman you're going to become later in life.
For sure. That's why I still dress when I'm allowed to dress myself. I still dress like I'm in the 90s.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So that dude was just like, oh my God, like, this is the time we band together. Like, again, the documentary I watched, he talks about, like, when World War II ended, we thought it was the end of war, period. Like, that was going to be it. It'd be a unified, prosperous future, and much to our disappointment, it wasn't the case.
No, everyone started nipping at each other immediately.
Yeah, exactly. This power vacuum would happen, and then everyone started kind of just fucking with each other. But I don't know. Like, it's just, it breeds such a fucking amazing breed of human being,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've said this before, where, like, we'd always hear, at least me, my grandparents escaped World War II. They escaped fascist Italy. And I remember being younger, always thinking, like, oh, my biggest story is standing in line for 3 hours to see Star Wars. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that people like us, we're now entering those times as adults.
Yep.
Whereas Stan Lee got to have those times inform his entire life.
Yeah.
Our entire life has informed us to prepare for those times. So it's very strange right now.
Right. I mean, we are, like, let's say, 8 decades off from just pure chaos and divide. Like, I'm thinking, like, World War II, where it's just like, this might be it. Like, we have global evidence that the planet might be just done. Like, this might be the end of times.
If you want to get dark, they've recently just halved it again. They say we have until 2025 to stop our emissions, or else major catastrophe. So it was 2100 10 years ago. It was 2050 5 years ago. Now they're saying we have till 2025 to get the emissions to a point to make the impending catastrophe manageable.
Right.
It's like there's no way to stop it now, but to make it manageable, we need to completely be green in the next, like, 7 years. So they just keep, every time they go and measure the Antarctic, they go, oh, we need to shave a few decades off of how long we thought we had.
You know what it is? It reminds me of, like, anyone who's ever done, like, a house renovation project. You're always just like, this will be done by Tuesday, and then by Sunday you're like, we need to go to the fucking store again.
Yeah,
we gotta get all this shit. Like, are you serious? Like, this isn't gonna be done till next week. Fuck.
And to use a term that deserves a rim shot, the environment is snowballing. Boom.
It's getting, exactly.
Go. No. Hey, can we get into the Bill Maher of it all?
Let's get into the Bill Maher of it all.
Let's do it. So Bill Maher is under a lot of heat right now for his comments about Stan Lee, and people are furious at him.
Should we read an excerpt?
I can read you the excerpts of what he said. The guy who created Spider-Man and the Hulk has died, and America is in mourning. Deep, deep mourning for a man who inspired millions to, I don't know, watch movies, I guess. Which is kind of funny.
It's pretty funny.
Then the assumption everyone had back when I was a kid, both the adults and the kids, was that comic books were for kids. And when you grew up, you moved on to big boy books without pictures. And then he basically said, I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that thinks comic books are important. And I'm like, people are furious about this, but I love comic books, but I openly acknowledge that they aren't heavy shit, right? Like, unless you make, like, there are occasional graphic novels for sure, but if we're talking like Marvel and DC and specifically, I love them. I absolutely love them. I read them to this day, but they are meant for a younger audience, right? They're not meant for adults.
But that goes to a thing of like the intent of the original work versus the effect it has.
And the intent was pulp magazines for kids.
For kids, but like it also inspired insane. Like I think, like for example, Alan Moore's Watchmen, I don't think exists without the Marvel Universe.
Oh, for sure.
And that's like a seminal comic that is insanely important. I think
definitely
insanely prophetic and everything, or realistically, like V for Vendetta, like you can pick anything from the Alan Moore catalog. I don't think any of those exist without Marvel. Now,
sorry.
Now, having said that, like I will admit, like my only problem with that statement from Mar was just the attempt to kind of correlate together ignorant fucking, not even Trump supporters, but the ignorance of America to a direct correlation to comic books.
I'm not sure. Like, I kind of read it as not a direct correlation, but more as an overall view of, like, when you have a group of people who are in such a state of arrested development that they need to justify the things they love as being adult,
right?
That they're willing to say that Spider-Man comics are on par with War and Peace, you typically have a population who's probably going to let dictators take over because they've lost the plot.
Because the infantilization of it.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. I'm like, you can love both things and understand that there's a difference between them, right?
Personally, and I don't know, like I can't speak for the entire planet. Was anyone comparing fucking like Stan Lee to Dostoevsky? Like, was anyone?
I think it's just we do live in this. I don't think anyone was directly saying, but the new American art form that has the comic book has been undeniably built up in our world now, where adults are wearing Captain America shirts.
But I see that as a direct byproduct of marketing. Of just like Disney wants your dollars, so they're going to shove these movies down your throat, sell you a T-shirt, and make you think it's the most important thing. So
and
when
adults should be able to go, no, thank you, right?
But like, I think that like because without those movies, there's no way his passing gets the headlines. Like nowhere near as big of the headlines as it's getting right now.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? But like, let's say Walt Disney was the one who passed. And people are mourning, saying, "Oh my God, this is so tragic. I love those movies as a kid. Oh, they meant so much to me. I showed them to my kids." To me, and Bill Maher goes out and he's just like, "Are we really mourning the creation of the guy who created Mickey Mouse, something that was for fucking children?" And I'm like, that's to me like there's again like going back to Stan specifically, there is a family element to it. There's a very personal connection. To say he was just a comic book creator kind of undermines all the work he did for like in the public face, going to cons, meeting fans. Like the guy was not, I mean, I'm sure there's some philanthropy in his life, but just the amount of work he committed, like that dude didn't have to do all that shit, but he did all that shit. So just to like to demean it to just like he created the Hulk, he made Spider-Man. I'm like, there's more to it than that.
Yep, I totally agree. I think that Bill Maher's time. I understand what he's saying. He should have said it 2 years from now.
And
Let's talk about comics. Let's talk about the state of Arrested Development.
Yes,
that's a discussion we need to have. For him to say it today or the day he did after Stan Lee died is fucking horrible.
It really feels like he was just trying to jump on the coattails of someone's death to get headlines. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude,
for sure.
Where was this argument whenever Infinity War made $1 billion? You could have said it then.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
That's true.
That was my only problem with it. It's just like you're at that point you're no better than the Phelps family going to funerals and protesting, saying God hates fags and shit. It's like, dude, people are mourning. Don't insult them. Don't fucking demean them. Like, let them have their moment. Like, maybe you don't have a personal connection to it, but millions of people do. And to try and take it away from them and undermine it, and what's worse is to undermine it just to make your point popularized, kind of shitty.
No, I agree. Bill Maher tends to go a little nuts sometimes.
Yeah.
I love Bill Maher, but he is a complete asshole. Mm-hmm. But again, like, honestly, if you'd waited 9 months to say that, then there would be a conversation I think that's worth having.
Sure.
But right now, it's like, Jesus. I kind of agree with what you're saying, but what the fuck?
Oh, I agree. Like, I think we had a similar conversation whenever Infinity War came out, and people were like, I'm broken by, like, the end of this movie, and we're like, come on, man. Like, this ain't...
Like,
I
pity when life gives you a disease. Yeah.
Yeah, the sequels are greenlit. Chill the fuck out. Like, they're coming back. Yeah. Did you ever meet him?
Stan Lee?
Yeah.
I did not. I unfortunately, every time I go to a con, if he was there, it would always be that exuberant ticket price, and I'd always be in a situation where I'm like, I can barely afford to be here in the first place.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go grab some back issue comics I need, and that's about it.
I'm pretty pissed. I coughed up the money once, and I paid for a signed photograph. I think it was a package, signed photograph, and then you got a picture with him. Mm-hmm. And I was so pissed because the ticket they give you for your session, like, come back at this time for your photograph, had his signature on it. I'm like, oh, well, that's just what I wanted. I didn't need to buy the fucking separate photograph that he signed. So we should give that as a prize. I have a signed Stan Lee picture.
But actually, you want to part with your physically signed by him picture? Because the ticket would have just been a stamp, a print, right?
No, it's an actual signature.
Oh, really? It's
an actual signature. I have it on the face of the actual photograph I have with him.
I think the 12 people who listen to this podcast, that wouldn't be very fair. But if we can get up to 1,000 subscribers, we'll give away a draw for a signed Stan Lee picture. How about that? Because we need 1,000 to start
that works.
Monetizing. Yeah. So if you're listening, guys, share.
I met him. It was super brief. It was kind of fun. I always remember right before I went in, they had like this blonde woman, I guess, who worked for Fan Expo, but she was super European as hell. Like very like, no, don't touch. Okay, whenever you get in, it's like mini Hannibal Lecter. Whenever you get in there, don't touch him, don't talk to him, don't do anything. Take the picture and walk away. And I'm like, oh. I was like, maybe he's sick, or maybe Stan has like, his handlers were like, just don't let anyone touch him or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I walked in, they snapped the photo, and like I wrote about it on Facebook. I just said the only thing I thought that could sum everything up. I was just like, thanks for everything, Stan. Like, and it was great. He just went, okay, thanks, Stan. That's the only exchange I have with Stan Lee.
Get the fuck out of here, next.
It meant the world to me just because like he responded. It was so, you realize like that is his personality. In that brief little exchange, you're like, you are 100% exactly who I hoped you would be.
Yeah, for sure.
And then cut to 2 weeks later, my friend Josh got a picture at a con. He's got his arms wrapped around Stan. They're shaking hands. They're grinning like they're old friends. And I'm like, what the fuck was that woman's problem?
Yeah. Did she even work there? I don't like the idea of other people touching my Stan.
Don't look at Stan. He's mine.
He's mine. Get fucking away from him.
But yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Enough said.
I think at the end that the world is as bad as everything is right now. It's just got a little worse without Stan Lee being in it anymore.
Gets a little dimmer without the lighted Lee, man. Yeah. I didn't think it was gonna hit me as bad as it did. I was raking leaves out in the driveway a week ago, I believe. Was that when it was? When you passed?
I think it was about a week. Yeah, about a week now.
Yeah, I was raking leaves, and I just got a text from my friends like, we just lost Stan. That's all it said, and I literally like my knees buckled, and I just had to sit in the driveway. It was like my grandfather died. And I just had to sit there and be like, oh, like, I knew it was coming. I knew it was inevitable. I knew I was going to have this day, but it still hurt more than I thought it was going to.
You know what I found odd about it was how everyone was racing to be the one who told people about it. I thought that was a little macabre. I think that was a little messed up. I got 6 different messages of people telling me, almost with a giddy delight, like, Stan Lee died. I'm like, why? Why is everyone so into telling people this?
The worst is whenever someone says like, Stan Lee died. When I read about it, I first thought of you. I'm like, then what? So in other words, you read something you knew would make me sad, and you were me like, I can't wait to tell them.
Chris Carson's cat dies. I gotta tell Chris Carson.
Hey Chris, guess who in your family has cancer, dude? What are you doing?
Come on, I know that it's like the people who write first on internet articles.
Yes.
Like, oh Jesus. But at the end of the day. Yeah, rest in peace,
life well lived. We can all of us can only aspire to be as prolific and successful and as excited about life as that dude was.
As Stan Lee was, yeah.
Yeah,
even in the face of all the people surrounding him that did not have his best intentions, he still maintained a sunny disposition, which
still shone through, man. And
is something, yeah. Oh.
So, what's next?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just also say, anyone listening, if you want to share any stories you have about Stan Lee, please do so in the comments section. We'd love to hear what your adventures with the man himself were. And yeah, I guess we should just talk about our ideas going forward for this podcast.
Yeah, we have we're giving each other homework assignments now.
Yeah, I mean, we're still going to do the big movies that come out in theaters because Christmas season's around the corner. There's going to be some big films we'll talk about. But in general, we're just going to start assigning each other movies that the other person hasn't seen in order to have a conversation about them.
Yeah.
And the first one, you gave me Tombstone.
So good.
That's the first one. And then I'm giving you have your choice between The Lower Depths, Brain Candy, or Wonder Boys.
I think I got Lower Depths down, though, so I think I'm going to do that one first.
Yeah, let's do it.
But Wonder Boys I'm in just for the cast. Like, oh my god, Iron Man hanging out with fucking Spider-Man? Like, what?
Oh, he does more than hang out with him, but you'll see.
Oh! I wonder what these boys are
up to. Wonder Boys is
Actually, we
one
got
of,
a lot of fucking superhero cred here. We've got Hank Pym.
Yep.
We've got Peter Parker Raimi era. We've got Rachel Dawes. We've got Tony Stark.
We got Zed from Men in Black.
He doesn't count.
Yeah, Men in Black was a comic book.
I don't care. After I saw him fucking fly kick what's-her-face in the face in the second one, I was like, I'm done with this franchise. You lost me. That was awful.
I do want to say as a note about Wonder Boys is that it's an I remember the line in Scott Pilgrim where he talks about the adaptation of the comic book.
What's the line?
Who was the character when Scott's
the movie?
going down into the underground venue, and then both time he goes down, he says it differently. He says he thinks the comic was better, and then he says the movie was better. Como.
What's his face? The hipster kid with the glasses. Yeah.
That line is stolen from Wonder Boys because there is a point in the background where you hear like, it was more of a literal adaptation than a visual one, and you just kind of hear that in the background. And it's page for page the book except the ending. They tagged on an ending that I always shut it off before the last 60 seconds of the movie. Because they just need to wrap the movie up, and the book goes on for another 3 chapters. So that movie is a 10 out of 10, and then the last 30 seconds is a half star out of 10. They really should have just ended it right before that.
I'm just on the Wikipedia page. It fucking hurt it very badly too. It bombed at the box office.
Oh fuck yeah, it's super bombed. But it's a Michael Chabon, however you want to pronounce it, novel, and I love that writer. So anything that they adapt of his, I usually love, and I do. It's one of my favorite movies. So I really hope you enjoy it. But we'll start next week with Akira Kurosawa's The Lower Depths and Tombstone. That'll be what we'll talk about.
I also assigned Carson because I am such a lowbrow fucking dude. Jackass 3D, which I'm assuming he's avoiding the bubonic plague at this point.
I just flipped a table, and I've been sitting in a corner just grumbling ever since. I heard that was one of my assignments. I hope I end up loving it and I kill myself doing a stunt, and then you have to do a post-mortem podcast about my life.
This was supposed to be where Carson would review Jackass 3D, but due to a tiny Hot Wheels car inserted into his rectum and a terrible case of diphtheria, he will not be joining
us this week. He has been baked into a pie to be served to his enemies.
Yeah.
It is my ultimate funeral plan.
He will not be joining us this week or ever, for that matter.
Space action hero going forward. But yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps it up, guys. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening and join us in our time of mourning.
Yeah, in these sad times, and it feels almost scummy to plug the site, but check us out at spaceactionheroes.com and like and subscribe and all that good stuff.
Hey, listen, if Bill Maher can fucking self-publicize off the Stan Lee's desk, who are we
he's on
any
break,
different?
Too. He should have at least waited until the show was coming back on. Jesus. Anyways.
All right, guys, have a good week.
Bye.